It was the last Christmas where the house still felt like a home. I can still hear the faint hum of Bing Crosby on the old stereo, the smell of cinnamon rolls in the oven, and the low murmur of voices that made the walls feel warm. My wife, Margaret, was bustling in the kitchen, humming a carol she didn't quite remember the words to. She had this apron with little reindeer stitched on the front. It was faded and frayed at the edges, but she wore it every year, like it was her armor. Before we dive into the drama, let me know where you're watching from in the comments and hit subscribe. What's about to unfold is something you won't forget. She smiled that day, genuinely smiled, not the polite, pressed lip kind people give out of obligation. No. This one reached her eyes, made them crinkle like paper snowflakes. I caught her looking around the living room, watching our daughter decorate the tree while sipping mulled wine, and I could see something settle in her. Peace. Like everything we had built still meant something. That was the last time I remember seeing her like that. Our daughter, Ellie, had brought her new fiancé that year, Derek. Slick hair, a too expensive watch, and a voice that sounded like he was always giving a TED Talk. The kind of man who shook your hand without looking you in the eye. He called me sir, with a smirk, like he was humoring a relic. Ellie used to cling to my arm when we hung lights. She used to ask for my help untangling the Christmas cords. But that year, she barely looked in my direction. She handed Derek the star and said, "You do it. You're taller than Dad anyway." That stung more than it should have. I laughed. I played along. That's what fathers do, right? We make space. We don't make noise. But it was in that moment, watching her choose him to finish what had always been our tradition, that I felt something small shift. Not just in her, but in the room. In us. Later that night, after everyone had gone to bed, I sat alone in the living room, watching the tree lights flicker. Margaret came and placed a hand on my shoulder. She didn't say anything. She didn't have to. That was our thing. Quiet comfort. She passed away the following spring. Everything after that Christmas unraveled slowly. But that night, in the soft hush of tinsel and old memories, I saw the beginning of it. The first quiet betrayal. She smiled that Christmas, and then she never did again. After Margaret passed, the silence in the house turned heavy. It wasn't just the absence of her voice, her footsteps, or the way she always left a drawer slightly open no matter how many times I closed it. It was the way everything else fell quiet, too. The phone stopped ringing, the neighbors stopped checking in, and Ellie got busy. She came back for a few weeks after the funeral, said she wanted to help me sort through things. "Make sure you're okay, Dad." That's what she told me. I believed her. At first, I was grateful. I was still waking up expecting to hear Margaret in the kitchen. I'd walk into rooms and forget why I was there. So when Ellie brought boxes and a label maker, when she started reorganizing the office and digitizing bills, I didn't stop her. I thought she was stepping up, becoming the woman her mother raised. She changed all the passwords, bank accounts, utilities, even my email. "It's easier if I manage it all," she said. "You don't need to worry about this stuff, Dad. Just relax." That phrase became her refrain when I wanted to pay the water bill. "Just relax, Dad." When I asked about the insurance paperwork, "Just relax, Dad." I handled it. When I said I'd like to host Christmas again, "Let's not overdo it this year, okay? You should just relax." What I didn't see then was how quietly she was replacing me, not just in the house, but in the story of my own life. She took Margaret's wedding ring and tucked it away. She removed family photos from the hallway for reframing, but they never came back. She canceled the newspaper, closed Margaret's charity memberships, and started referring to the guest room as her office. The house didn't feel like mine anymore. But I told myself this was love. This was her way of caring. She was just being efficient, right? Taking care of her aging father. Isn't that what daughters do? It wasn't until she corrected me, about a memory I had of Margaret's last birthday that something inside me stirred. She said, "No, Dad. That didn't happen. I was there." But I remembered it. I remembered the way Margaret held my hand at the restaurant, the way she whispered that she wanted Ellie to have the house someday. But not yet. I started wondering, what else was I remembering wrong? Or worse, what else was she rewriting? I didn't push back, not yet, because I still believed I was being cared for. I didn't realize I was being quietly edited out. One login, one box, one relax at a time. It was late December, the kind of evening where the frost creeps along the window panes like lace. Margaret and I sat at the kitchen table, hands wrapped around steaming mugs of cocoa, the lights on the tree flickering just beyond the doorway. That night, she pulled out a yellow legal pad and said, "Let's do something that matters this year. No sweaters, no silly gadgets. Let's give them something real." That's when we started drafting the new will. We didn't have a fortune, but we had a home filled with memories, a small lakeside cabin we'd saved for our whole lives, and a modest nest egg from years of careful budgeting. We wanted to divide everything with intention, not equally, but fairly. The house would remain mine until I passed, and afterward, it would go to Ellie. Only if she upheld the wishes we wrote together. Keep it in the family, keep it standing, and never sell it for profit. The cabin, our quiet escape by the water, would go to our godson, Jeremy, the only one who ever offered to mow the lawn or shovel the snow without being asked. He deserved something. Margaret insisted on setting aside a chunk of money for a local scholarship. "A legacy," she whispered. "Something that keeps speaking after we're gone." We finished it just 2 days before Christmas. Margaret tied the final document in a red ribbon and slipped it into a cream envelope. She smiled as she sealed it, kissed the corner like it was a love letter, and handed it to me. "We'll give it to Ellie on Christmas morning. Let her keep it safe until we're ready to make it official." And that's exactly what I did. I gave it to Ellie right after breakfast, while the wrapping paper still littered the floor and Derek was bragging about his bonus check from work. I pressed the envelope into her hands and said, "Don't open it yet. Just hold on to it. This one's important." She nodded, distracted, already half listening. She slipped it into her purse without a second glance. I never saw that envelope again. At first I didn't worry. Margaret and I still had time. But then spring came, and Margaret fell sick, quietly at first, like a whisper under the floorboards. By summer, the hospital visits had become routine. By autumn, we both knew. When she passed, I was too consumed by grief to think about paperwork. It wasn't until months later, when the topic of the will came up again, that I asked Ellie about it. Her face went blank. She blinked. "What envelope, Dad?" That was the moment I felt the first real chill, and it wasn't from the weather outside. The house looked the same that Christmas, but it didn't feel the same. Ellie had taken over the decorating, and everything was pristine. Too pristine. The tree was one of those artificial ones that came pre-lit, the ornaments all matching in color like a showroom. Not a single handmade craft, not even the little angel my wife and I had bought at a roadside market during our honeymoon. I asked about it, and Ellie just shrugged. It didn't match the theme this year. Theme. Apparently, Christmas had become a curated experience. She hired a catering company. No smell of roasted turkey in the oven. No apple pie cooling on the windowsill. Just silver trays and white-gloved staff, moving around like ghosts in someone else's home. Even the fireplace had been replaced with a sleek gas insert. No wood, no crackling, just a button you press to simulate warmth. I was seated at the far end of the dining table next to the dog, and even he looked like he didn't know what to do with me. Everyone else was bunched together, laughing over champagne and crab cakes. Derek raised a toast about next year being even more profitable. I wasn't sure if he meant work or something else. Then came the joke. Derek looked around the table and said, "Well, if everything goes, according to plan, we might just inherit early, huh?" And just like that, he winked and nudged Ellie's arm. She laughed like it was some harmless remark, like I wasn't sitting right there. Breathing, blinking, listening. I stared at my plate. Couldn't eat. Could barely swallow the lump rising in my throat. Not one person said anything. Not Ellie. Not my sister. Not even Jeremy, who used to come to me for advice on girls and school and life. They all just kept chewing, sipping, and smiling. Like I was already gone. I excused myself after dessert, though there wasn't any real dessert, just some imported chocolate torte with a name I couldn't pronounce. I went upstairs to the bedroom Margaret and I once shared. The room still smelled faintly of her lavender perfume, even after all this time. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared out the window at the snow falling under the porch light. Downstairs, laughter continued without me. I realized then that I wasn't part of the tradition anymore. I was just a placeholder, a legal formality, a figure waiting to expire. The warmth of Christmas had left with Margaret, and in its place there was champagne, polished silver, and a joke I'd never forget. I tore the house apart looking for that envelope. It started small, just a quiet curiosity, a need to see my wife's handwriting again, maybe feel close to her in some way. But as the days passed and I searched drawer after drawer, cabinet after cabinet, that curiosity turned into something darker. The envelope was gone. I remembered the weight of it in my hand, the way Margaret tied the ribbon herself, double-knotted, just in case. I remembered handing it to Ellie, right by the tree, her fingers sticky with cinnamon glaze from one of the rolls Margaret used to make. I remembered the exact words I said. "Don't lose this. It's important." She nodded, said, "Of course, Dad." Now she acted like it had never happened. "Are you sure you gave it to me?" she asked one morning, over coffee in her too-clean kitchen. "Maybe you gave it to Mom and forgot." I stared at her. Her eyes didn't flicker. Her voice didn't waver. And that scared me more than anything, how good she had become at pretending. I pushed again a few days later. I told her it had our final wishes, everything we had planned, and that I needed to see it. She blinked. "Oh, was that the one with the ribbon? I think I might have thrown it away when we cleaned out the attic." Threw it away. Just like that. Like it was junk mail. Like my wife's last message to her family didn't matter. Like the life we built together could be reduced to clutter. I stopped trusting her that day. I began searching more obsessively, not just in my house, but in my memory. Was there a backup copy? Did Margaret leave one with the lawyer? Did I dream the whole thing? That's what she made me feel, like I was losing it, like my grief was clouding the facts. But I knew. I knew. I even caught myself apologizing to her. "Maybe I'm confused," I said once, voice shaking. "I'm sorry if I misplaced it." And she smiled. That kind of smile that doesn't show teeth, the kind people give when they think they've won. I raised that girl. I held her hand when she was sick, worked double shifts so she could have braces, stayed up nights pacing the living room when she didn't come home from college parties. And now she looked me in the eye and rewrote our history like she had the pen. I wasn't crazy. The will was real. But somehow, so was this version of her, a daughter I didn't recognize anymore. And maybe that was the part that hurt most of all. It was a Thursday. Cold, gray, uneventful, the kind of day that drifts by without leaving a mark. I'd gone to the kitchen to grab a sweater I'd left on the back of a chair. That's when I heard them. Ellie and Derek talking in the next room, unaware I was just around the corner. "I talked to the realtor again," Derek said, his voice low, clipped. "She said if we list in the spring, we'll get top dollar." Ellie sighed. "Well, once the house is in our name, we'll finally be able to sell and move. I'm sick of this place. Too many ghosts. Sell. Move." our name. I stood there, frozen. My hand gripped the edge of the doorway like it was the only thing keeping me upright. They spoke so casually, like I wasn't still living there, like I wasn't still alive. The house they were talking about, my house, was built brick by brick with Margaret. We chose the wallpaper together, argued over carpet versus hardwood, planted the oak tree in the front yard the year Ellie was born. That tree was still standing, even as everything else cracked beneath my feet. I backed away before they could see me. I didn't want them to know I'd heard. Not yet. I needed to think, to breathe. I went up to my room, no, our room, and sat on the edge of the bed, the same place I'd sat after that cursed Christmas dinner. Only this time, it wasn't sadness that filled my chest. It was rage. Quiet, cold, devastating rage. This wasn't just a mistake. This wasn't forgetfulness. This was a plan, a slow, calculated erasure. They had decided that my time was up, that I didn't matter, that I was just a technicality standing between them and a down payment on some modern condo in the city. I stared at the wall and played her words over and over. Once the house is in our name. It all made sense now. The missing envelope, the way she dismissed my questions, the way Derek smirked when he spoke about the future like I wasn't part of it. They had done something, rewritten the will, or destroyed it entirely and made a new one. I didn't know how. Not yet. But I knew why. They were counting on me being too old, too tired, too grief-stricken to fight. Counting on me to just relax one final time and let them take everything. But they forgot one thing. This house may have ghosts, but one of them wasn't dead yet, and I was done being quiet. The call came on a Tuesday morning, one of those mornings where the fog hangs just a little too low and the sun doesn't bother showing up. I was sitting at the kitchen table staring into a half-empty mug of coffee that had long gone cold, when the phone rang. "Harold Wexler," the voice said after I answered. It took me a second to register it. Harold had been my attorney for nearly 30 years, but more than that, he was a friend. He came to every barbecue, knew Margaret's chili recipe by heart, and had danced at Ellie's graduation party like he had no cartilage left in his knees. "I've been meaning to call," he continued. "Just wanted to check in. I expected to see something filed by now." "Filed?" I asked, confused. "What do you mean?" Harold paused just for a moment. But in that pause, my stomach dropped. "Well, Margaret's will. You said you'd be reading it to the family over the holidays. That's what she asked for. We signed off together, remember? You even told me you gave it to Ellie for safekeeping." I didn't say anything. Not because I didn't remember, but because in that instant, it all came rushing back like a slap across the face. The red ribbon, the envelope, Ellie's distracted nod, and the silence that followed it. I never saw it again," I finally said. My voice felt distant, like it was coming from the other end of the line, not from my mouth. Now it was Harold's turn to go quiet. "You never. John, you realize that's the only copy we signed together. The original should have been presented already. Margaret was very clear about wanting it read aloud. She even wrote a message to go with it. Something about fairness and legacy. Fairness. Legacy. And my daughter buried it like yesterday's junk mail." "Harold," I said, trying to steady my voice. "Do you still have a digital copy?" "Yes, but it hasn't been notarized or stamped. I was waiting for you to file the original first." "Well," I said, jaw tightening, "we're going to need that copy." "John." Harold's voice softened. "What's going on?" I didn't answer. Not directly. Because now I knew. It hadn't been a misunderstanding. It hadn't been grief fog or old age or misremembering. Margaret wanted that will read aloud at Christmas. Wanted the family to know who we were, what we valued, who we trusted. And Ellie made sure that never happened. She'd stolen more than just a piece of paper. She'd stolen my wife's voice. But I had just found it again, and this time I wasn't going to lose it. I didn't throw a chair. I didn't storm down the hallway demanding answers. That's not who I am. That's not who Margaret loved. Instead, I sat. At the kitchen table, same spot I always used. The wood was worn smooth beneath my fingers. 1,000 cups of coffee, 100 holiday meals. And now, the weight of betrayal pressing against my chest like a slow-moving avalanche. I didn't need a shouting match. I needed clarity. So I watched. I listened. I noticed things I'd ignored before. Ellie on the phone in hushed tones, her laptop angled away whenever I walked into the room. Derek with papers spread across the counter. Real estate projections, he mumbled once, not realizing I was looking at a printout of my property tax bill. Then there was my sister, Janine. She started visiting more often, always with a new story, always oddly curious about what Dad plans to do with the place. I'd catch her walking through the hallway, running her hand along the banister like she was already picturing her furniture in the house. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just Ellie and Derek. It was all of them. Somewhere along the way, they must have whispered to each other in living rooms I wasn't invited to. Spun a plan around my silence, mistook my grief for weakness, and convinced themselves that what was mine would soon be theirs. They'd carved up my life, like a pie still cooling on the windowsill. And me, I was just the crust, dry, disposable. I'd spent years believing that love meant stepping back, letting the younger ones take the lead. I thought that was grace, giving space. But what I'd actually done was vanish, slowly, quietly, until even I wasn't sure I was still here. But I was, and I was done being made the fool. I pulled out the will copy Harold had sent me. I read it again, line by line. My wife's words, my wife's voice, still intact, still powerful. It was all there, everything they tried to erase. I didn't scream, but inside me something started to burn. Not a wildfire, not an explosion, more like a pilot light that had never gone out. And it whispered, "Watch. Wait. Remember. Let them make their moves. Let them get comfortable. Because the next move would be mine. And when it came, they wouldn't see it coming." I asked her plainly one afternoon, my voice steady, almost casual. "Ellie, do you still have the will your mother and I gave you?" She blinked like I'd asked her what was for dinner, then smiled, too quickly. "Of course, Dad. It's around here somewhere. I'll dig it up later, okay?" I nodded. Let her think I was satisfied with that answer. But 3 days passed, then a week, nothing. So I asked again. She frowned this time. "I think it might be in storage. Or maybe we gave it to Harold. You know, with everything going on, it's all a bit of a blur." That was her go-to now, the fog of grief. But she wore it like a mask, not a wound. Eventually, after enough prodding, she handed me a manila folder one evening. No ribbon, no cream envelope, just a dry, cold stack of paper that felt sterile in my hands. "This is the latest version," she said. "Mom and I updated it after she got sick. We just didn't want to worry you." I flipped through the pages. Ellie's name was everywhere. The house in full. The cabin, for future family development. Margaret's jewelry, to remain in the family. But the wording conveniently left Ellie in charge of safekeeping. Even the charitable donation fund had vanished, replaced by vague language about investments for the grandchildren. There were no grandchildren. I looked up. "Your mother and I never discussed these changes." She didn't flinch. "You were grieving. She didn't want to burden you." "Did Harold draft this?" Her eyes flickered. "Derek had a friend. He's a paralegal now. It was just quicker." I stared at the paper again. I could still feel the real will in my memory. Margaret's careful language, her emphasis on fairness, the red ribbon she tied herself. This version read like a shopping list. Cold, calculated. She poured herself a glass of wine and said, "Dad, we're just trying to help. You shouldn't be dealing with all this stuff at your age. Let us handle it. We'll manage things better than you." That was the line that made something in me snap. Better than me. I folded the will slowly, tucked it back into the folder, and handed it to her with a soft smile. "Thank you, sweetheart," I said. "I appreciate you taking care of things." She looked relieved, like she thought I'd swallowed the bait, like the role of the clueless old man fit so snugly she didn't even question it. But inside, I wasn't fooled. I saw every move, every shift, every word that had been bent to cut me out. And now I had what I needed. Their forgery, their motive, their arrogance. All I had to do was wait, and watch them hang themselves with the rope they so confidently braided. Harold looked at me like I'd just come back from the dead. He opened the door to his office. Same creaky hinge. Same smell of old leather and peppermint tea. "John," he said, eyes wide, "I wasn't sure you'd follow through." I held up the folder. "I need this made official, quietly." He nodded. No questions. That's the thing about old friends. They know when to talk and when to just listen. We sat down, and together we reviewed every line of the original will. Margaret's will. Our will. Nothing had changed since the day we signed it. The house would remain in my name until I passed. The cabin would go to Jeremy, because he'd earned it, because Margaret trusted him. The scholarship fund would be established in her name, helping kids who had no one to believe in them. And Ellie, she'd receive what we had set aside for her. Fair. Not everything. Just enough. Harold had a notary on standby. We signed, stamped, and sealed it all within the hour. Then I made a request. "I want you to help me write something," I said. "Not a speech, not some legal statement, just Margaret's voice. One last time." Harold raised an eyebrow. "You want a letter?" "No," I said. "I want her words, her heart. Something they can't argue with. Not coming from me, but from her." So we pieced it together, using notes from the old will, fragments from Margaret's journals, phrases she used to say out loud when we talked about legacy and family. We built a message that sounded like her. Warm, clear, firm. A message they wouldn't expect. A message they couldn't twist. When it was done, I printed the letter on cream stationery, folded it carefully, slipped it into a thick envelope, the same kind Margaret had used. Then came the ribbon. Red. Software. Slightly frayed at the ends, I tied it just as she had done. A double knot, with the ends looped neatly underneath. My hands trembled, not from age, but from memory. I could almost hear her humming as she did it the first time. Harold looked at me. "You know they won't take this well." "I'm not doing it for them," I said. "I'm doing it for her." He nodded slowly, then offered his hand. "Good luck, John." But I didn't need luck. I had something better. The truth. I slipped the envelope into my coat pocket, pressed it close to my chest. I already knew the moment I'd deliver it. Christmas dinner. Same table. Same timing. But this time, the gift wouldn't come wrapped in paper and bows. It would come wrapped in justice. The house was full again. Laughter bounced off the walls. Silverware clinked. Wine glasses sparkled under the chandelier. It looked like a celebration, but it didn't feel like one. Not to me. Ellie was in pearls, the kind Margaret used to wear. She wasn't old enough to pull them off, but she wore them anyway, like she thought they made her matriarchal. Derek was already 2 glasses deep, boasting about some new investment property he was in talks to acquire. The way he said it, you'd think he built it brick by brick himself. My sister Janine had found her 4th refill of Cabernet and was already dropping loud, syrupy compliments to whoever looked her way. The whole room buzzed with the noise of people pretending to care. I sat at the head of the table. First time in years. They used to reserve that seat for me, back when Margaret was alive, and Ellie still looked at me like I hung the moon. But somewhere along the way, my chair became just another seat, and I was quietly shuffled to the edges. This year I reclaimed it. Funny thing, no one noticed. Not at first. I sat there, quietly watching, tuning out the conversation. Derek said something about leveraging equity. Janine chuckled too loudly. Ellie kept checking her phone, like she was waiting for someone more important to arrive. And I waited until the plates were filled, until everyone had settled in, heads dipped politely in shallow grace, until the room reached that perfect moment of pause. Then I picked up my glass, tapped it twice with the back of my fork. Clear, sharp, it sliced through the chatter. They all turned. I stood. "I'd like to read something," I said. The room quieted. Derek furrowed his brow. Ellie gave a little chuckle, the kind people give when they're about to be mildly annoyed. "Now, Dad?" she asked. "Maybe after dinner?" "No," I replied. "Before we eat." I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out the envelope. Cream paper. Red ribbon. Her eyes locked onto it. That's when the blood drained from Ellie's face. "What is that?" she asked, voice a little too light. I didn't answer. I broke the seal. Inside was Margaret's voice, the one they'd tried to silence, the one they never expected to hear again, her letter, her will, her final message. I unfolded the page slowly, taking my time. The whole room was still. Even Derek's wine glass hovered mid-air. I began to read, and with each word, the air shifted. "To my beloved family," I read, my voice steady. "If you're hearing this, it means I'm no longer with you, but I have one last gift to give. Not of wealth, but of clarity, of truth." Eyes darted around the table. Janine sat up straighter. Derek leaned back, lips tightening. Ellie didn't move. She just stared at the envelope, like it was a ghost. I kept going. Line after line, her wishes spilled into the room like warm honey. The house would stay in my name. The cabin would go to Jeremy. Her jewelry would be divided, not hoarded. The donation to the scholarship fund, non-negotiable. And finally, her closing words. "Fairness is the only inheritance I care to leave. Let no one rewrite what was born of love." I folded the letter, set it gently on the table. Then I looked at each of them, one by one. "Merry Christmas," I said. And for the first time in years, I meant it. I watched their faces as I unfolded the letter. The room was still, heavy with breath that no one seemed brave enough to take. Even the fireplace, fake and flickering, couldn't thaw the chill that settled once Margaret's handwriting met the air. "To our family," I began, her script dancing across the page like a memory come to life. "This is our final wish. Not a gift wrapped in ribbons, but a message wrapped in truth." Ellie shifted in her seat. Derek's jaw tensed. Janine stared straight ahead, her wine glass suddenly very still in her hand. Margaret's words flowed gently, but with weight. You could almost hear her voice in them, kind but firm, like the woman who once ran a household with a gentle glance and a will of iron. "We leave this letter," I read, "not out of distrust, but out of hope, that fairness will outlive us, and that no one will take more than what love would give." Ellie's knuckles had gone white on the edge of the table. I watched her lips part slightly, then close again. No words. "The house," I continued, "shall remain in John's care until his passing. He built it with his hands, filled it with his laughter, and kept it standing through storms, literal and otherwise." Gasps now, subtle, controlled. My sister looked down. "Upon his death," I read, "the house may go to Ellie, provided she honors its purpose, to shelter, to protect, to remain in the family, Not to be sold, not to be leveraged, not to be flipped for profit. I glanced up, and Ellie was staring at me like I'd just pulled the earth out from under her feet. The lakeside cabin, I read on, will belong to Jeremy. He has shown the character and care of a true son, though not by blood, by heart. Jeremy's eyes went wide. He hadn't expected that. I saw his hands tremble slightly in his lap. And a portion of our savings, I said, shall be dedicated to a scholarship in Margaret's name, because she believed in second chances, in dreams no one else dared to fund. And then, the final line, the one that echoed louder than the rest. We do this not to divide, but to remind. Love is not measured in inheritance, but in integrity. I folded the letter slowly, laying it down like a sacred thing. Silence blanketed the room. No one dared look at me, except Ellie, her face pale, eyes wide, mouth half open as if she'd prepared for a different script, one she had written herself. But this was my wife's voice, and no one, not Ellie, not Derek, not a forged document or a twisted memory, could take that from me. It was Margaret's last word, and now it was the only one that mattered. Ellie broke the silence with a laugh, tight, shrill, false. That's outdated, right? She said, trying to smile as her eyes darted between me and the letter. I mean, come on, Dad. We all know Mom updated it before she passed. You probably got confused. It's fine. She waved a dismissive hand toward the table, like she was brushing off a fly, but her voice cracked on the last word, and that crack spread like ice across the room. I didn't respond. I didn't have to, because that's when Harold stepped forward. He had been waiting by the doorway, quiet, composed, just as we'd planned. He held a neat stack of folders in his hands, crisp legal blue, the kind you only see in serious matters. Slowly, deliberately, he began passing them around the table. To be clear, he said, voice smooth as stone, this is the notarized, certified copy of John and Margaret's original will, filed with the court this morning, registered, public, binding. Ellie froze. Janine took one look at the folder in front of her and stood up. No announcement, no protest, just quietly pulled her shawl around her shoulders and headed toward the door, wineglass still in hand. Derek, less graceful, slammed his palm down on the table. This is bulls. Language, I said, without even raising my voice. He looked at me like he wanted to say more, but he didn't, because in that moment, something shifted. The power, the quiet, slow, inevitable kind, had changed hands. And Ellie, she sat there, staring at the paper in front of her like it was written in another language. Her lips moved, but nothing came out. Her hands shook. Her shoulders collapsed inward. It was like watching a house of cards fold, one floor at a time. I didn't know, she whispered, but she did, and we both knew it. The room was so quiet, I could hear the clock ticking in the hallway. Same clock Margaret wound every Friday morning. Its ticking had never sounded so loud. Harold placed the last folder gently beside me and nodded. His job was done. Mine, too. Ellie finally looked at me, really looked at me. Her eyes weren't angry, not yet. They were scared, small, the look of someone who had been playing chess with ghosts and just realized the board was real. You knew, she said. Yes, I replied. For how long? Long enough. She looked down again, eyes catching on the name Jeremy written beside the cabin. I saw the moment she realized it was over. Years of whispers, manipulation, and plans, undone in a single evening. Not by shouting, not by threats, but by the soft, steady voice of a woman who had loved us all, and by the man she trusted to wait for the right moment to speak. I had just folded Margaret's letter and tucked it back into my coat when I heard her heels following me down the hallway. "Dad, wait, please!" Ellie called out. I didn't turn. "Please," she said again, louder this time, catching up, grabbing my sleeve. Her voice wasn't angry now. It was desperate. "You don't understand. I did it for us. For the family. You were alone, and I was just trying to—" I stopped walking and faced her. Her eyes were wet, but I couldn't tell if it was guilt or fear that watered them. "You did it for yourself," I said, calm as stone. "You lied. You erased your mother's wishes. You gambled on my silence." She shook her head, quick, frantic. "No, that's not—" "I was trying to protect what Mom built. What you built. I thought I was doing the right thing, I swear." I looked at her then, really looked. For a moment, I saw my little girl again, the one who used to crawl into bed when the thunder scared her, the one who clung to my hand at the airport because she didn't want to go to summer camp, the one who cried when we dropped her off at college. But that girl was gone. And the woman standing before me had chosen something else. Control, power, greed dressed up as concern. "No, Ellie," I said quietly. "You did it because you wanted to be the one holding the pen. You didn't want to protect our legacy. You wanted to rewrite it." She opened her mouth, closed it. Her hand dropped from my sleeve. I took a step back and watched her stand there, breath shaky, eyes darting toward the living room where the others sat in stunned silence. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't offer comfort. Let her sit with it. The weight of her choices, pressing down like iron. Let her feel every ounce of guilt settle on her shoulders like the inheritance she almost stole. And as I turned and walked away, I heard no apology, just the soft echo of her heels against the tile, dragging shame behind her like a long, heavy train. I sat alone in my study that night, long after the guests had gone, the house still echoing with the absence of everything false. No more forced laughter, no more polite betrayal served in silver dishes, just silence. Real, honest, peaceful. I looked around the room, every inch of it saturated with memory. The dent in the bookshelf where Jeremy had flung a toy as a boy. The worn armrest where Margaret used to perch while she read me bits of the paper. The framed picture of Ellie in her graduation gown, still smiling like the world hadn't yet turned her sharp. And I realized something I should have seen long ago. Legacy isn't about blood. It's about love, the kind that doesn't have conditions. So I rewrote the future, not to punish, but to protect what Margaret and I built. The house, this home that had carried our laughter, our grief, our everything. I decided it wouldn't go to family at all. It would go to a local women's shelter in Margaret's name, a place for rebuilding lives, not flipping houses. Let it be filled with stories again, not just strategy. The cabin, with its cracked dock and sun-faded porch swing, I left to Caleb, a boy I mentored years ago when he had nothing but a beaten backpack and too many bruises to explain. He visited me every birthday without fail, never asked for a thing, just sat with me. That kind of loyalty deserves something solid. And then there was Sarah, my goddaughter. Quiet, sweet Sarah. Barely out of college, working 2 jobs, and still managing to bring me tea every Sunday without fail. She never asked for updates on the will, never hinted, never pried. She just showed up. Her presence was her love. So I started a small trust fund in her name, enough to give her the freedom to chase whatever dream she'd been too busy surviving to speak out loud. I signed the papers that night, feeling Margaret's spirit settle beside me. Not angry, not vengeful, just proud. I didn't leave behind a dynasty, no vast empire, but I left behind choices made with heart, because in the end, it's not about rewarding loyalty with things. It's about honoring love with legacy. And this time, I knew the right hands would hold it. Sometimes, late at night, I still sit by the fireplace. The fake flame hums softly, nothing like the wood fires we used to build, but it gives off enough light to cast shadows on the walls. I sit in the same old armchair Margaret picked out years ago, the one I once thought was too soft. Turns out softness has a way of enduring. I sit there quietly, not in sorrow, but in something else. Peace. Not because everything is perfect, far from it, but because I know I did, right by her. And by myself. When I stood at that table and read Margaret's words aloud, I didn't just crack through the silence they tried to bury me under. I didn't just expose their lies. I reclaimed something that had been quietly taken from me over years of being told to relax, to step back, to let go. I found my voice again, and I made sure they heard it. I didn't raise it. I didn't shout. I didn't spit or accuse or throw chairs like some wounded patriarch in a bad TV drama. Number I read her letter with the steadiness of a man who had nothing left to prove, just something left to protect. Margaret's smile still lives in the corners of this house, in the folds of that letter, in the red ribbon I keep tucked in the back of a drawer where no one can misplace it again. She didn't ask for monuments. She asked for fairness. She asked to be remembered with dignity. And I kept that promise. Ellie hasn't spoken to me since that night. I imagine her pride took a beating she didn't know how to recover from. Derek sent a terse email about legal overreach. I didn't reply. Janine sent a Christmas card that arrived late and unsigned, but Sarah visits. Jeremy calls. Caleb sent a photo from the cabin last week, the dock repaired, the porch freshly painted. He wrote, "Still feels like you're here." In a way, I am, not through bloodlines or grand estates, but through decisions made with care. Through love passed down without strings. That night I read the will wasn't about revenge. It was about clarity, about truth, about standing, finally, in the center of the life I built, not as a footnote in someone else's story, but as the author of my own ending. And I read it loud, so they'd never forget who I was, and who she was, and what we stood for, together.